Fax of the President to the American Newspaper Publishers Association, Waldorf Astoria Hotel, New York City, April 27, 1961.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much your generous invitation to be here tonight. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
Understanding words is what you really need to start doing. You need to start doing your homework and understanding words. If you put an S in front of words, it becomes swords. And that's what words are. They're cutting. They can cause you great trouble. Humans are word-controlled creatures. So we need to establish what words mean. Again, when we talk about law, there's a Roman maximum in law that says, "For he that would be deceived, let him." Simply meaning, if you are so ignorant as to be deceived, then that's your business. That's your problem. So you need to do your homework and find out what the words mean, especially in relation to law and government. Because there is a world of occultism that is operating today throughout the world, in which you use certain words, and when those words are used in a court, they don't mean the same thing at all.
Young, old, all sorts. I mean, from across the entire community spectrum. Why are we all here? I think we're all here because we know on a fundamental level in our hearts that we have a right to peace and abundance, and we aren't getting this. It's like there's a big stink in the room, everyone can smell it, everyone's going, "Oh my God, who cut that one?" And there's a group of lawyers in the corner with nose plugs on saying, "Smells like roses to me." We know there's a big stink in the room. We know that they use words they will claim are our laws that have the force of law over us, and yet at the same time they will claim that we cannot possibly understand these words because we are not a lawyer. There's a guy by the name of David E. Sherman. He's one of the premier tax accountants, and if you look in Snafu and Google David E. Sherman, he's on the record as stating these detaxers think they know what they're talking about. They read something that looks like English, but it's not. It's law, and they can't understand it. I called them on that. I said, if they can't understand it, how is it constitutional to use this to create liability on them? Never heard back from them.
How did the American people lose the original constitutional republic?
Well, first of all, everybody thought we still had the same system of government that we always had, because they did the change so slowly and gradually.
From Vermont is recognized.
Mr. President, there is a war going on in this country, and I'm not referring to the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. I'm talking about a war being waged by some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in this country against the working families of the United States of America, against the disappearing and shrinking middle class of our country. The reality is that many of the nation's billionaires are on the warpath. They want more, more, more. Their greed has no end, and apparently there is very little concern for our country or for the people of this country if it gets in the way of the accumulation of more and more wealth and more power.
As Agenda 21 became more and more apparent to me, I began using the line in Parliament that government
the third pyramid, and now we see the truth that the Nile Delta, as you see here, superimposed on the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, shows us the Nile Delta. This is unbelievable because when you zoom in, Cairo is where it ought to be. Cairo, Illinois, Memphis, Tennessee is where it ought to be. And right above Cairo, you see Markanda, which is where the two eclipses will cross at the center of the Nile Delta. The Star of Egypt. You can't make this up. You can't stretch this. There you see the Ohio rivers and Mississippi River forming the boundaries of the Delta, almost perfectly superimposed. This is unbelievable. This is why they chose America. Study this map in more detail as it overlays the United States and find other cities that match up with the Nile Delta. I can almost bet you this video will be censored. It will be shut down. It will be defunded because they don't want you to know the truth about this.
Giants in the land, and now we're having Hollywood just come out with movie after movie after movie trying to denigrate biblical Moses, it doesn't matter if it's Noah, trying to distort true history so they can insert their own history. For instance, in the movie Noah, this is pretty fascinating. Most people don't know this. The fallen angels are the good guys and Noah's the bad guy.
No, they're called the Watchers, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They're called the Watchers. So
Another key temple site that I've investigated is Abydos, which is called the Gate to the Underworld. This is the Shrine of Osiris. Abydos, which looks like a modern corporate facility, is located where it is because of a former temple that once existed behind it called the Osirion. Researchers such as John Anthony West have examined the incredible 100-ton red granite blocks that we see here at the Osirion, and I have my picture here to reference the incredible size of these blocks. They've concluded that this is an example of a pre-flood temple.
What was interesting is that there was a huge satanic ritual that was performed on the very spot where Area 51 happened by this Jack Parsons, and in which they had this magical ceremony called Babylon Working, and it was designed by Aleister Crowley, who was a Satanist who called himself the B666.
Yes.
And the purpose of this series of magical ceremonies, which was performed on the spot of Area 51, where it's now located, was to unseal an interdimensional gateway, they said. And so in this, they hoped, would allow other entities known as the, quote, old ones, access to our space-time continuum. And this witness said that he saw Jack Parsons rip a hole in space-time there, and he said that something evil flew in. And one other interesting point is that Aleister Crowley, who was a Satanist, who called himself the B666, as I just mentioned, he claimed to have contact with some kind of alien named Lamb. And this Lamb, he drew a picture of this alien that he was in contact, receiving messages from this being. And the picture that he drew of this alien, it's a striking resemblance to the common gray ET drawing.
Because you have to be perfectly aware that we're asking you to do this. See, they just can't trick you. You get me? They just can't trick you and say, well, he don't know he's serving the devil, because the Lord won't honor it.
On June 29, 2008, An author by the name of Brandon Levon began posting on a site called Above Top Secret. Random things began to happen to him, such as his car getting towed off and searched, his computer stolen while he was gone, and after the release of his second book, his house was seized by the city and demolished. Many of his threads were removed from the site, and the last two posts were titled Info Warnings and Brandon Levon is no more. And what he has discovered is there is a pattern behind almost all religions around the world, no matter how far back you go, and they are based on the Zodiac calendar. Each cycle of the Earth is 26,000 years. These are then separated into 4 periods of 6,500 and are considered worlds by all ancient people. And each of these worlds has a creator, savior, and destroyer. The first age of the first world was the goat, the creator, then the archer, the savior, and the scorpion, the destroyer. It then starts again at the scale, creator, virgin, savior, then lion, destroyer. Please understand, this video is only a small fraction of the evidence these books contain. Let's begin. Kronos had 3 sons, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. And according to Plato's dialogues, each was allotted 1/3 of the earth. In the exact center of all the land masses of the world was put the marker that represented their rule over what would become the 3 races.
In 1877, author and theologian Joseph Seiss demonstrated that the Great Pyramid resides at the intersection of the longest line of latitude and the longest line of longitude, the exact center of all the landmass in the world.
This bloodline kept its status as gods by the knowing about or causing of a global catastrophe.
Power was not given. It had to be taken. Vowing revenge, she made a choice to embrace evil. Set, the god of death. They made a pact. A pact that would unleash darkness itself.
Do the many strange carvings found at Copan really provide proof of contact between the Maya and otherworldly beings? And if so, might that contact have produced offspring that could also be traced to an extraterrestrial source? On the west side of the main temple at Copan stands a 63-step structure known as the Hieroglyphic Stairway. It contains more than 1,200 stones, carved with symbols that record the history of the kings of Copan.
This hieroglyphic stairway is the longest Mayan inscription in the world. It emphasizes the divine right of the 16 rulers of the Copan dynasty to rule their subjects, a power given to them by the gods.
A Hebrew professor from the University of Johns Hopkins University. He found that 8 out of 10 Palestinians have the true Hebrew bloodline. 2 out of 10 do not. Those Palestinians are the real Jews. He found out 8 out of 10 in Israel do not have Hebrew blood in them. They invaded Israel in 1947, slaughtered 40,000 true Hebrews, and took the place over. Their flag flies the satanic emblem on it. Now, why is that?
So another interesting part of this, again, is the ancient astronomy. A lot of these megalithic sites, are aligned to astronomical precision points. So when we look at some of these cultures, the Egyptians and the Sumerians, and dive into this knowledge, the 12 houses of the Zodiac, where does this information come from, and what does it actually mean? What was it being used for? What's the significance of this? One thing I would state is the Sumerians, as we'll talk about here, being the first civilized culture to show up, were the ones who actually were the first ones to denote 12 parts of the heavens and divide them into zodiacs. And the way this works was very simple. Just like you would hear, we're in the age of Aquarius or in the age of Pisces. The way that would work was simply that right at the time of heliochal rising, which is when you go out early in the morning and the sun is just about to pop up over the horizon, and it hasn't yet, and you can still see the stars against the backdrop of the sky. Well, what happens is when the sun starts to rise, if you can see, for instance, the constellation of Aquarius, whatever constellation the sun is rising in front of, you say, oh, we're in the age of Aquarius, we're in the age of Pisces. So it's a very interesting division of the heavens into 12 parts, but this knowledge is shown to have been held by high priests and courts from cultures, not just the Greeks and the Romans or the Egyptians, but it goes way all the way back into the Sumerians, as I'll show, having the first invention of this knowledge. But some of these cultures show knowledge of astronomy that it boggles, and it really is hard to put into perspective. The Egyptians, for instance, have not only a view of the 12 houses of the Zodiac, or a divisional breakdown of the heavens, but they also took a much farther back view and had artifacts and replica elements that actually showed our position within the universe, where it wasn't just our solar system or our galaxy. It was a whole breakdown view, much larger out, which would show various other points in the universe. And these were inscribed on tablets and stones, where archaeologists have now broken down and visually found representations of the zodiac signs, but in a much more narrowed down view, where the view is in a much more expanded view of what they're explaining, and they've only identified the symbols that we know of in our zodiac, but it's a much more larger view that encompasses an astronomical layout that boggles modern archaeologists, and they really aren't able to accept a lot of the things that are presented, which we'll get into. So these artifacts still on display, and again, the archaeological community will accept zodiacal symbols, but the large view of how they could have known the position in the universe or in our solar system really just kind of boggles modern science. So you can see various points of reference for these diagrams and the clarity of what they're showing. This is one zodiacal set, just like it would be changing in a calendar. So again, the division of the heavens into 12 parts, a very interesting number, 12. Why 12? Where does this information come from? And as we'll see, the number 12 is a very pivotal number of information stemming from the Sumerian culture. Now, this is a Sumerian tablet that's roughly 4,500 years old, and you can see that it has symbols representing like the scorpion, and you can see the turtle there and various other symbols that are known to be astronomical symbols. The turtle isn't one, but various astronomical data coming out of the Sumerian culture, where this was the earliest known sources of this information. So another interesting
From top again. Say from top. From top. Amen. In the north.
northern hemisphere during late December, the days are at their shortest lengths and the nights are at their longest. For those of the pagan world, this has always been the greatest time of the year to celebrate and practice the works of darkness. The pagan calendar identifies this period as the winter solstice. It was during the pre-Christian midwinter pagan celebrations of Scandinavia's Norsemen where today's Christmas traditions began. As a means of honoring the pagan sex and fertility god Yule, a 12-day celebration during the month of December was inaugurated. A large single log considered to be a phallic idol was lit on fire and kept burning for 12 days. Animal or human sacrifices were offered in the fire on each of those days. Wild, delirious reveling accompanied the daily sacrifices as drunken participants defiantly strove to make contact with spirits. 1,000 miles away in pre-Christian Rome, celebrants were paying homage to their own gods during the winter solstice. Witchcraft traditions hold that a number of pagan gods were given birth during this period, including Dionysus, Attis, and Baal, chief male god of fertility and licentiousness. Another pagan god from Persia, identified as Mithra, was said to have been born specifically on December 25th. Mithra was the god of the unconquerable sun, the god of the light between heaven and earth, worshipped at that time by an influential Roman cult. His birth symbolized an end to the long nights and a return to the dominance of the sun. During the month-long winter solstice celebration, courts in Rome were closed. Any and all crimes were allowed. Homosexuality, cross-dressing, and uncontrolled debauchery reigned supreme. Rome's order was turned upside down. Even children were allowed to join in the drunken orgies as part of the Juvenalia celebration. By 270 AD, the Roman Emperor Aurelian had made it official, setting aside a 7-day period from December the 17th through the 24th, culminating in an exchange of gifts on December the 25th to celebrate the birth of the sun god. This Roman orgy to end all orgies later became known as Saturnalia, in honor of the god Saturn, the god of excess. Roman soldiers invading Britain brought with them their pagan orgiastic traditions. Upon taking root in England, Saturnalia became known as the Festival of Fools, reigned over by the Lord of Misrule.
As what was happening in America. So David started Can-Am Missing, a group of retired police officers, search and rescue experts, and other professionals who are trying to get a grip on how and why thousands, not hundreds, thousands of people have gone missing, most never to be seen again.
Almost, right? Even the toilet looks like antique.
Still has power and everything. Oh my god. It's from 2016? Dude, there's like a multiple. On like this bathroom. Just turn the power on so we could see.
Dude, there's still like mouthwash, like.
Dude, I think these people were just foreclosed on. You know, they just kind of got kicked right out. It's crazy, man. Mirror. Wow. Just turn on the liquor cabinet, dude. Was that a Chick-fil-A?
With the dailies?
What the hell? No, oh
There's
my
like
God.
minis.
Dude, someone's liquor
Dude,
cabinet.
look at that. That's like solidified. That's like not even alcohol.
the good life. They're treated very well. And then they join. They decide, okay, I'm going to join. I'm going to join with you guys. And you start moving through the levels and you realize, hey, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up for. Because then you start learning the ghastly truth of Satanism. And then when you get in, it's rituals, eating babies' hearts, sacrificing babies, drinking blood, being forced to have, if you're married, adulterous relationships because all of them are forced into adultery. Satan doesn't honor a marriage. You're married to him. Satanists have their own services that mock Christian services. They have them almost every weekend. They have them in underground churches across America. And they do everything opposite and against what a real church would do. Why would you want to join a group of people that think eating feces and drinking urine is fun? It's not optional. You have to do it. They all do it. And they don't complain. They get beyond that stage. They don't complain. They do it. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, what do? You go to an underground Hollywood club, a super secret Satanist club. Do they serve feces on toothpicks? These people are nasty. And you can tell us the sheer demonism, demonic beings that control them, that make them do it. I mean, what human could eat feces and not just puke? Eating feces is huge with some. Huge. Anything abominable is high ranking with Satan. Anything that we would think is totally inhuman, abominable, then that's what you must do in Satan's realm. These groups are huge. There could be 100, 200 people at a gathering. They meet on estates, in people's mansions, often on a Friday or Saturday night, so it looks like the person's having a party, maybe. They meet in churches on Saturdays, underneath Catholic churches, for rituals. They have these rituals where they bring in animals. And this weekend, pretty much all the groups had donkeys. And they force all the members to have sexual relations, bestiality with the donkey. Okay, you've been on my nerves for 2 months, you get the cat. And you've been on my nerves for a month, you get the dog. And you, the highest ranking of us all, you get the donkey. She chooses who gets what. And she forces them to be sodomized. They all do this, not just her. They force them to be sodomized by donkeys. They force them to perform fellatio on donkeys. And nobody gets away with it just because you're the president of the United States who goes to the Chicago ones where Penny Pritzker is in charge. Just because you're the president doesn't mean you get out. It means you have to give more. Because you've got the highest rank in the land. More abominable things are expected of you. It goes on. One of the biggest things you give up is any kind of humanity. It's nothing but about humiliation and degradation. You want more, you have to give more. You have to give up everything about what makes you human. And they all don't sit around in their black robes. That's so Hollywood. Because in all these rituals, a big part of them is the orgies that take place. They all take their clothes off. They're all doing drugs.
the fact that Prince Barnhart, when he was a member of the SS, had been part and had also been a officer in the IG Farbid Combine, and that there was a department or a section known as the Farbin Builder.
Te weten dat dit geen Walt Disney verhaaltje is. Het is helaas zo dat wereldwijd, en dit is niet alleen van deze tijd, dit is al van duizenden jaren. Ik heb ook ooit nog een stuk theologie gestudeerd. Zelfs in de Bijbel kom je het tegen bij de Israëlieten. Een van de redenen waarom de eerste 10 stammen toen uit hun land werden gezet en verbannen werden naar Babylonië, was juist vanwege de rituelen met kinderen. Inclusief het offeren van kinderen. Dus dit is een lijn. Vanuit al die shit ben ik ook gaan geloven. Omdat ik besefte dat er meer was dan alleen maar hemel en aarde. Er is werkelijk een onzichtbare wereld. Je praat werkelijk over een duistere macht. En je praat ook over een lichtmanifestatie.
Initially, we started off thinking that this is just a Canadian and a United States issue. And as the publicity went out, people started to contact me and says, hey, we have this case here, we have this case there. And son of a gun, they're like cookie cutters of all the same case. That's how closely they are assembled. So it wasn't a big stretch to realize that the top 4 countries, United States, Canada, UK, and Australia. Why? I don't know. But those are the top 4. They did find his backpack in extremely rugged and hazardous terrain on that mountain. And you can see it's all granite. And one of the things about Yosemite, it's almost all granite. And I think that's pretty odd that those other locations I showed you, all granite. Now it's all granite here. And they have the most disappearances in the world. You can kind of see that I'm setting the pace for you, for your country, about what's happening, little people disappearing, big people disappearing, both ages of that spectrum. It stays consistent. Justin O'Malley, 3 years old from Brisbane, missing 6/15/75, 2:30, Girraween Steep Park, border of Queensland, NSW, wearing a red jumper. 150 searchers, 40 soldiers, missing in an area of granite. That's where he disappeared. Does that look at all like Colorado, where those people were disappearing? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? In fact, when I first looked up this park, I almost fell out of my stool about how close that was to what we're dealing with in Colorado.
Today, Queen Elizabeth II is the head of state of the great nation of the Hebrew covenant called Great Britain. Her genealogy chart, according to the College of Heralds in London, traces her blue bloodline back to Abraham, who many modern scholars believe to be the Egyptian pharaoh, Amenemhet I. By connecting 22 dots, the true Hebrew and royal Egyptian identity of Queen Elizabeth II comes into focus. Number 1. What is the stone of Jacob, a Hebrew patriarch, doing beneath the Queen's throne chair? Number 2. Why was the Queen crowned at her coronation ceremony on top of a symbolic Egyptian step pyramid? Number 3. The monarch's crown has 12 stones at the base, each representing the 12 Hebrew tribes. The 12 stones of the 12 tribes were also worn on the breastplate of Hebrew high priests in Canaan. Number 4. The Union Jack represents the reunion of the United Kingdom of the 12 tribes of Jacob, or Jacob. The Union Jack is red, white, and blue, the same colors as the 3 crowns of Egypt. Number 5. The royal scepter originates in ancient Egypt and was carried by the Egyptian god Amun and by Egyptian pharaohs, who called themselves the Son of God. The royal scepter is now carried by pharaonic descendant Queen Elizabeth II. Her scepter contains the world's largest cut diamond, called the Star of Africa. Number 6. The Queen's punishing flail or whip is partially hidden under her arm. The flail or whip also originates with the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Number 7. The symbol of the bee can be found within the Queen's royal wardrobe. In ancient Egypt, bees were the symbol of Egyptian royalty as well as the symbol of Egypt. Number 8. The symbols on the British coat of arms reveal Britain's Hebrew origin. According to the Bible, the harp symbolizes the Hebrew King David. The biblical lion and unicorn holding up the shield symbolize the nation of Israel. The motto, Dieu et mon droit, means God and my right, indicating the divine right of the British monarch to an eternal throne. Number 9. The headdress worn by judges and the Queen's high-ranking officials originate in ancient Egypt. Number 10. Kilts, like the one worn by Prince Charles, originate with the Egyptian pharaohs who wore white kilts. Number 11. The hymn, Zodiac the Priest, written by Handel, was performed at the Queen's coronation in 1952. Zodiac the Priest was the biblical priest who anointed the Hebrew King Solomon while the people cried, "God save King Solomon! Long live King Solomon! May the king live forever!"
God save Queen Elizabeth. Long live Queen Elizabeth. May the Queen live forever.
Number 12. During the coronation ceremony, the Queen turns to face the 4 corners of the globe. The orb carried by the Queen represents the globe over which the monarch rules. Number 13. The monarch's coronation gifts of a rod, bracelets, and a ring are a reenactment of the Bible story of the Hebrews, Judah, and Tamar. Number 14. Royal jubilees originate in ancient Egypt. Egyptian pharaohs celebrated their jubilees after 30 years of rule. In pharaonic tradition, the Queen has celebrated both silver and golden jubilees.
This painting is of George Washington laying the cornerstone to our Capitol. This is significant because he's wearing his full Masonic ritual regalia. He's got his square and compass.
And then, as I walked into the main temple of this Scottish Rite building in Washington, D.C., right there before me was the black cube of Saturn, the Roman god of time worship.
And the Hebrew writing in the middle says, God said, let there be light, and there was light.
One of the driving forces behind this movement, the Illuminati, is the Satanic cult movement in this country today. So I began my little journey forward. And one of the matters that I developed information about was an individual I learned about was Aleister Crowley. He likes to have his name pronounced Crowley to rhyme with holy. And the Satanists today, and for the number of years in the past, have basically used his philosophy and his writings as a guide.
He had so many Masonic degrees that you could fill up 5 pages of a book with them. This guy was probably the most highly honored Mason in the world. He styled himself the wickedest man in the world. He believed himself to be the great beast, and he changed his name to Aleister Crowley, so it would add up in both English, Hebrew, and Greek Kabbalah as 666. In 1904, Crowley had a communication with an extraterrestrial being named Iwas. And this being, through his wife, kind of a channeling type operation, brought forth a book that was called the Book of the Law in 1904. And this book declared that the slain and risen God, i.e. Jesus, had stepped off the throne, and that a new God, the crowned and conquering child, was taking his place. As a result of this, Crowley proclaimed the end of Christianity and the start of Crowleyanity. Crowley taught that the way you could live forever was by vampirizing little children sexually. And he personally bragged of having slaughtered 150 male children in 1 year. This is why he was called the wickedest man in the world.
And now listen to this sentence, folks, closely. For the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable system. We're talking about human sacrifices.
And they'd also drug them up, and they'd take a sacrificial knife and they'd start from the chest and move all the way down to your abdomen. And then that's how they sacrificed, and they'd collect the blood and they'd drink it. When the mid-September through mid-November, they sacrificed babies and nothing but babies because they need the pure blood of the untainted children. And I didn't understand what it was like. I can't believe I'm seeing this every year of my life. I've experienced that, and that was the hardest part for me. It's like hearing those babies literally scream and cry, and then seeing their blood flow.
The little boy was taken to a basement. He was crucified alive. First he was skinned.
Why is it that no one knows this? Because there's Satanists in the police force and also in the government, the army. They're everywhere. They're even on the council of, the representatives of the United States also. And they're silenced because this is not being exposed because they don't want it to be exposed. Because they're really good at lying and hiding things.
Rebecca, what happens to the people that want to come out of Satanism?
They get killed. They get followed, they get taken, they get sacrificed in front of the congregation of the Satanic Church.
Why?
Because they know too much information about the Satanists and who their names and places of where they keep the people underground, and they just know too much information. There's no, it's like being in a gang or in a mafia. You don't get out alive without consequences.
Okay.
Yes. Now my name is Annemarie van Blijenburg. I have been married for 24 years met Kees van Kortlaar. Kees van Kortlaar, together with his 3 brothers, form a criminal organization known as the Octopus Syndicate. They work from 1960 on till the day of today. In order of Queen Beatrix, they have organized martel, torture, rape and killing of children in a public setting. They organized that through youth detention centers in the Netherlands. The youth detention centers were told that the criminals were asking for the Dutch court for children who could work with for the Dutch Queen for a certain period. The detention centers were very happy. They thought that Queen Beatrix was a very social woman, and they gladly volunteered in giving files of certain children to the criminals. When they wanted to verify what the criminals told them, they were given a name and a phone number of a high-ranking officer at the court of Queen Beatrix, and that high-ranking officer would state and tell them that indeed those criminals were seeking children to work for a certain period at the Dutch court.
Elijah Wood, the star of the Lord of the Rings series, is making headlines around the world, risking his career and his life, admitting that an organized pedophile mafia runs Hollywood and is protected by industry elites.
I'm going to read the names I was given, and these are people, folks, that we see every day, and you never realized, ew, behind closed doors, he's a worshiping Satan freak. He's eating poop and having sex with animals and demons. And they all have herpes, folks. Almost all of them have herpes. It's a given when you're a Satanist. So this weekend involved with donkey rituals, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Rabbi Shmuley, however you say his name, the co-founders of Google, the guy who started Beanie Babies, Derrick Rose, co-owner of Chicago Bulls, or the owner of Chicago Bulls, Mike Quigley, congressman, Senator Dick Durbin and Mark Kirk, William Wrigley, the Wrigley billionaire, Emmanuel Rahm and his wife and his brother, Kanye West, Sam Zell, owner of the Cubs, owners of the Blackhawks, the co-founder of Groupon, Valerie Jarrett, NBC News anchors Allison Rosati, ABC's Ron Majors, NBC's Brian Williams, Wyatt Rockefeller, and then you have Hillary and George Soros. You know, you look at these people and you wonder, don't they want out once they get in? How do they get past the feces crap? And I was told that they do enough to stay alive.
In 1868, there was a corporation founded. Anyone can incorporate a company. Well, in 1868, there was a company incorporated. And in that particular company, the founders of that company they referred to it as the United States Corporation. And they stipulated that anybody who would be a member of that corporation or work for that corporation would be called not an employee, but a citizen.
Believe it or not, all of these statutes, they are a legislated rule of a particular society which had been given the force of law, but that's the law society. All of these rules are the rules for the law society, and you can prove it. Only they can make the statutes, the regulations, or the orders. You are not allowed to pen these. If you go into court, they claim that only they may use these documents or these words, only they can claim complete understanding of these words. Unless you're a member of that society, you cannot understand these words. Why? Because societies have a number of powers. As a society, you can generate and create your own rules, and no one who is not a member of that society is going to have a say in creating those rules. You can claim that no one but a member of that society can understand those rules because you can actually create your own language as a society if you want. And you can do this by taking an existing language, let's call it English, and you can change just a few words, not tell anyone else how those words have been changed, and guess what? You've got an entirely new language that appears to be English, but it's not, and only they know it. And this is the magnificency of the deception. This is why it's so beautiful.
Those three cities belong to no nation and pay no taxes. They are Washington's District of Columbia, which is not part of the city of Washington or of the United States, the inner city of London, which is not part of London or England, and Vatican City, which is not part of Rome or Italy. These cities, called city-states, have their own independent flag, their own separate laws, and their own separate identity.
Vatican City is in fact a state, the smallest principality in the world. It lies on the banks of the Tiber, completely surrounded by the city of Rome. Its status as a separate state emerged from the Lateran Agreements of February 1929. It has its own newspaper, postal service, radio and television station, its own flag, and a population of about 1,000.
The Vatican also has its own army of Swiss guards, and it even has its own prison.
Zoals je net aangeeft, het is een piramidaal systeem. Dus je hebt de top, daar zitten die 8.500 mensen. En daaronder hebben ze een instituut gecreëerd. En dat is sinds 1930 is dat ontstaan vanuit Nederland. En dat is de BIS, dat is de Bank for International Settlements. En die is gevestigd in Zwitserland. En dat is het hoofdkantoor der hoofdkantoren van de banken, van het financieel systeem. Dus die top, die 8.500 mensen, die geven dus opdrachten naar Basel, naar de BIS. En van daaruit gaat het dus het hele systeem in en wordt het uitgevoerd. We kennen Basel-akkoorden. De banken, dat ging allemaal mis. En toen kregen we Basel I, Basel II, Basel III. Sommige mensen hebben dat wel eens van gehoord of in de kranten gelezen. Het gaat allemaal over die BIS. Nou, in 1930, wat ik je zei, is dat dus vanuit Nederland is dat dus ontstaan. In 1931 is dat instituut al erkend door eigenlijk alle landen in de wereld als zijnde de autoriteit, het hoofdkantoor der hoofdkantoren. Het is ieder centrale bank in de wereld is dus ook lid van die club. Het is een particuliere organisatie, het is geen overheid. Die hebben dus een headquarters agreement, een hoofdcontract. En in dat hoofdcontract staat eigenlijk helemaal beschreven waar die BIS over gaat. Wat die kan, wat die mag, wat die doet, alles erop en eraan. En als je die artikelen, want die kan je gewoon op hun website kan je die vinden. Als je dan leest waar hun allemaal voor staan, dan hebben ze dus allemaal regels ingevoerd die dus door de hele wereld erkend zijn. Waarin staat dat ze onafhankelijk zijn. Dat ze dus niet tot Zwitserland behoren. Ze zijn eigen baas. Dus het grondgebied waar het op staat, heeft Zwitserland niks over te vertellen. Er staat ook dat ze in alles onschendbaar zijn. Er staat ook eigenlijk dat ze boven deze aarde verheven zijn. Dat niets en niemand hun iets kan doen. Ze zijn volledig immuun. Dus ze zijn volledig gevrijwaard van alles wat hier op aarde is. Ze hebben ook een eigen politiedienst, dus je kan er ook niet zomaar binnenrennen van jullie rotzakken of wat dan ook, want er komt wat rottigheid uit die tent. Het is een volledig erkend instituut, wat eigenlijk een vrijstaat is en boven deze aarde verheven. Onschendbaar.
This is exactly what I saw when I did my statute deconstruction. I looked through and I suddenly saw what they were doing. This is their little trick. You are not obliged to register your children. If you do, it is at that point that you're creating a legal entity or a person. You are associating this person with your offspring. You are abandoning ownership or title to that person, and the government is seizing that under the laws of maritime salvage. It becomes their chattel property. They use it as collateral to float loans or to float bonds for loans. When they come to remove a child, they're not acting on the human being at all. They're removing the legal entity you created and abandoned and they now have title to. It's like borrowing a rain jacket from your neighbor for your kid. Your neighbor comes, says, I'm taking the jacket back. You let him take it with your child still in it. That's your person. That is what the government acts upon.
So an individual CEO, let's say, may really care about the environment. And in fact, since they have such extraordinary resources, they can even devote some of their resources to that without violating their responsibility to be totally inhuman.
Which is why As the moody Stuarts serve tea to protesters, Shell Nigeria can flare unrivaled amounts of gas, making it one of the world's single worst sources of pollution. And all the professed concerns about the environment do not spare Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other activists from being hanged for opposing Shell's environmental practices in the Niger Delta.
The sorcerers of antiquity called the use of this language spells. But if that word offends your modern sensibilities, you can call it a program. The source code that shapes reality. We harness energy drawn from other dimensions of the multiverse to cast spells, to conjure shields and weapons, to make magic.
Even if my fingers could do that, my hands would just be waving in the air. I mean, how do I get from here to there?
How did you get
Lady Gaga. Did you see Shaquille O'Neal showing off his ring? Saw a picture of it or YouTube or something. I didn't watch it, but I saw him holding up his masonry ring. He must have went to 33rd degree. When you reach the 33rd degree level, you get a ring, and inscribed on it is your title, which is worthy of worship. Does he really think he's worthy of worship? Would he get sodomized by enough donkeys that got him that title?
I'm wrong. Early on, the control mechanism over the population was religion.
Yes.
Okay? We're your gods, or we're direct mouthpiece from God, and God says you got to do this, you have to work at this, etc.
So we're going to go into some definitions from the Law Dictionary, what these terms mean. Jordan says we need to take a look at words because we're word-controlled people, right? And I'm not making any of this up. If you look in Ballantyne's Law Dictionary, a human being is a monster. So that's what, when you walk into court, this is how they're looking at you. So you want to get your constitutional rights. You want your liberties, not your freedom, but you want civil liberties. Well, they're working with this guy. How does that apply to you? So let's take a look at what monster says. A monster is a human being by birth, but in some part resembling a lower animal. A monster hath no inherent blood, and cannot be the heir to any land, albeit it be brought forth in marriage. Okay, so what are we talking about here?
Yep, there's the talpa. And it has the little round balls, the 10 of them, and explain for people exactly what it is we're seeing.
So on the left-hand side, what you see is what the Kabbalists call the tree of life.
Okay.
And the tree of life really is a map of the other side.
Okay.
So many of the devices, such as the television, the cathode ray tube, was actually crafted to make communication with the ether or the nether realms.
Wow.
So many of what we see in our technological world is stemmed from the occult. It stemmed from communication with otherworldly beings. And the tree of life is one that has been with magic throughout all eternity. You can find this encoded into the flower of life. You can find it encoded all the way back through history. Well, there is a missing spot when you go, at the bottom of the tree of life, that is Earth.
Okay.
And there is a straight path that leads to heaven, which is Kether, but at the top of the tree. And right below heaven is a missing spot, a blank node, and that is known as the abyss. Okay? There is a lord of the abyss, and his name is Typhon.
Okay.
And his hand sign is the peace sign.
Huh.
You see, Aleister Crowley, another Kabbalist, and, supposedly the wickedest man in the world and the dark magician and known as the Beast 666, he taught Winston Churchill that peace sign because it is the sign of Typhon, the Lord of the Abyss.
And I think we have an image of Typhon. It looks like a drawing. If we can put that up, it would be great. Yeah, there it is. And it's a really incredible looking image. And this is what they say is the Lord of the Abyss.
Yes, and is symbolized by that peace sign. So the Nazis were a solar force, and so Crowley taught Churchill the peace sign to fight the solar forces of the Nazis using the Typhonian powers of the abyss. And when you look at the television, the Nazis were the ones that were set to put televisions in everybody's homes. I know they make a joke about that, but the truth is that the corporation Telefunken, who also created the first computer, were the ones to first start mass-producing television. So it really was the Nazis. But if you were to go back to the dots picture real fast.
The previous, yep, it's up. Yep.
What you see in Talpa, so the voice is produced by a company named Talpa.
Okay.
And they're in cooperation with another company called Endemol.
Huh.
Right? Those are the guys who put out Heroes, right?
Right.
Well, Talpa puts out the voice. And what you see in their corporate logo is that they have taken the dot for heaven, and then they have moved it into the abyss, into the Typhonian powers.
Yes. Yep. I see that. That's really amazing.
Now, the Nazi Typhonian order, and more recently, the Ordo Templi Orientis, has a Typhonian order, and their entire purpose is communication for opening spatial gateways for these extra-dimensional beings. Again, the Typhon that you see there, the image, that is the beast of that region. Now, he has a symbol, and it took some digging I had to go through the Ordo Templi Orientis, many of their works, to find out what the symbol, because I learned that the mark of the beast was identical to the sigil of Nodens. And so I was kind of lost here, you know. Nodens is a Celtic god.
Okay.
And most recently came up in relationship to the Lord of the Rings.
Huh.
So it turns out Tolkien was studying Nodens in a Roman temple and decided that there was a ring found there that was cursed to the god Nodens. And it's believed that Tolkien took his ideas for the ring from this Nodens. And Nodens looks somewhat like Typhon and is related to that very same concept. Nodens is more like Poseidon.
Okay.
But yet he's still this Typhonian. Poseidon is a popularized version of this. It goes back to the god Atlas of Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
It goes to Leviathan in the Bible. It goes to Typhon in the magical orders. And the symbol of the heart of the sigil of Nodens is actually an O with an X.
Okay. And you want to go to the next image, which would be of Russell Brand?
Yes.
All right, let's bring up that Russell Brand picture. And we have it up. It's and you can see like he's holding a microphone, and you can see the O with the X in it, and that's kind of like his logo.
Absolutely.
Okay, continue, please.
So this symbol, now I do not believe Russell Brand to be a Satanist, and I do not believe him to be the Antichrist. But the truth of the matter is that they're presenting this concept and image to us subliminally and externally right to us. I have a consistent science that I've worked on for 20 years to finally classify this mark of the beast situation. You know, people say it's the microchip. They say it's the on your barcodes and everything, you know. But no, if you go to the heart of the occult, if you go to the heart of the people that are promoting the mark of the beast, then you suddenly realize that it's this symbol here, an O with an X.
And this symbol also looks very much similar to what you would see in the X-Men.
Exactly, on the beast, right?
Right.
So it is the mark of the beast on the beast by X-Men, and recognize that X-Men, because we'll get into Disney here, Kevin, but X-Men, of course, has been now purchased by Disney.
Right. They bought all of Marvel Comics.
Yes.
Continue, please.
Okay, let's carry on, because let's just see how many times this thing has been broadcast at. You go to the next one, and here you have, is it up?
Yep. That's with Madonna, I believe, at the Super Bowl.
This is Madonna's 33-minute sermon she gave at the Super Bowl, which was an occult ritual to the goddess, leading all the way back through Rome, through Egypt, and on back into even Babylonian. And you can see how many times the mark of the beast was placed on the stage.
Right.
And I don't say this lightly, because I have studied this, and you are now just getting the top of my pyramid.
No, I mean, a lot of people are probably looking at this, scratching their heads, but the thing to remember is that I don't believe in this stuff in the sense that I'm not like a Satanist or whatever. I don't worship Satan. I don't get into all that. But for the people that are promoting this, that are into this, this is what they believe. And then they put it out blatantly to the public, and the public is oblivious to all this. So you're looking at this, it doesn't mean anything to you, but it means something to them. And Freeman, just so that you guys know, Freeman is recognized as one of the world's leading experts on this subject. That's why he's here tonight on this program, to be able to present this information to you so that you can have that, ta-da moment where everything clicks and you get it. Because it's practiced right in front of you in plain sight. And if you don't know what it means, excuse me, you're never going to get it. So continue, please.
Yeah, you might also notice the VV symbolism, or what looks more like a big M in the center image. But it's actually a VV. And this has been consistent through this whole situation. So as I learned the number of the beast is 666, obviously, but the number of the abyss is 66.
Mm-hmm.
So this in Hebrew is VV, and this is why you'll see those same symbols.
And you see how in this image there's also stylized pyramids and everything all over the place. I know that that's also very important to these types as well.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. But you can see how many times the variations that they showed the mark of the beast in that 33-minute sermon. You know, I showed you 3 of them in one image, and there were a multitude.
Yes.
So when we're looking at this, we're actually talking about the concept of transmitting souls into another dimension.
Huh.
This is for invocation and evocation of entities. So that means either you're going to take an entity into your soul, a God form, as they would say, or you're trying to manifest one right there in front of you. And this is starting to tie into the transhumanist movement with the concepts of transmitting your mind into a computer or into a clone.
Which we saw in the movie. We saw that recently in the movie Avatar.
Absolutely. And Avatar was a very interesting study on that when you see that they needed the genetic twin brother to be able to transmit his mind into the clone that they had made for him, the alien hybrid clone.
Now, wasn't the story itself basically the plot the same as the old cartoon Fern Gully?
It was Fern Gully on steroids.
Yeah.
It was the exact same story. I was waiting for Tim Curry to come out and bust a note and start singing, but no.
Oh, that's funny. Continue.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's carry on. So the next image, of course, is the concern that MDNA, as Madonna is now known, you see, because she is a lead Kabbalist in all of this. She has been forever, and says that she seeks the original religion. Or so she has now taken the vowels out of her name, because Kabbalism and Hebrew do not have vowels.
Right.
So that's where you get the MDNA. But isn't it curious that the article that we're seeing here is about Madonna's DNA sterilization crew?
Mm-hmm. And this was published in a newspaper in Britain known as The Mirror. So you're looking right at the article.
Yeah, it was also on MTV and many other places because it was a complaint to many of the people running the theaters that she was playing in, or the arenas, because it would take so much extra time for her DNA sterilization crew to come and remove every fragment of Queen of Pop out of the building. So my question becomes, what does Madonna know that the rest of us don't? She's certainly with the in crowd.
Yes.
And we're moving to this new state. So quickly we could go to the next article to tie this together, because this was just current news.
Right. Cloning is used to create embryonic stem cells.
Absolutely. That is from Cell magazine, and of course now published on the New York Times.
Yep.
This is the idea of therapeutic cloning.
Okay.
This means that they can take a skin cell or a hair cell or anything that your DNA sterilization team didn't leave behind and generate any body part from it.
Huh. It's incredible. Believe it or not, we only have 2 minutes left, so let's try to wrap this all up the best we can and give it to the viewer for them to think about for the rest of the evening after the show's gone off the air.
You got it. Well, I would say check out freemantv.com to get the full story, and then, of course, our new book, Weird Stuff. You want to start there. We're writing it for the layman. We're just laying it from the beginning. Weird Stuff at freemantv.com. It'll shock you and also reward you with knowledge, because all of this is quite amazing. So in our current time frame, we have people that are trying to punch holes into the other dimension, making contact with extra-dimensional beings with the capability of transmitting that data, say a demon from another dimension, into your body.
Yeah, that's just bizarro world. But, I mean, they say truth is stranger than fiction, and I guess that's proof of it tonight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we didn't have time to lay it all out, but I definitely have years of data for you to look into.
Yeah, and if people go to freemantv.com, I believe it's freemantv.com, you'll get all the information. Folks, hey, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Freeman, thank you. My name is Kevin Gallagher. Please tune in again next week, next Friday night, to see what it is we'll be talking about. Have a great night. Bye.
No flesh left alive. And the genetic tampering, the genetic destruction, the designs of the Luciferian globalists to destroy every human being on the planet, to insert their new creation, we'll call him the Uberman, Nietzsche's statement.
This is what he's saying. Historical evidence of genetic manipulation, which points to extraterrestrial intervention, i.e. the missing link. The DNA molecules fuse together. This does not happen naturally. Many signs of genetic manipulation showing advanced technologies that have been used to remodel the genomes in human DNA. So we have a scientist and more scientists that are admitting there are anomalies that we need to know about. But there's more. Dr. Olson is one of many scientists, as well as others within the field, that are aware there's something about our DNA that's unique. Dr. Olson, apart from being a molecular biologist, is also an experiencer, and she calls one of the letter people, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that, and she means. So this is what she's saying. If my information downloaded is correct, there will be 12 different main groups of new DNA people. It corresponds to 12 different main groups of ET alien DNA donors, so 9 more to go. I do wonder what their different features will be and if they will be allowed to go public. Their DNA, our DNA, is activated mainly by remote control and frequencies. So it's like putting a virus in software, and when they are using their DNA, as long as they're alive, they will give off energy patterns that spread to our surroundings, almost like the flu or GMO genes, which can contaminate via frequency patterns. So that is one of the ways this is going to happen. The DNA of the star kids is tenfold the amount of information. This is Tracy Taylor, another experiencer. She was in my book Awakening, talking about her experiences. She expands on that in The New Human. Abilities such as telepathy, manipulation of time and space, nonverbal communication are all conscious abilities for these children and are quite natural. Charmaine here is talking about herself being a human hybrid reptilian. And she told me when we spoke in England that she felt more comfortable with her reptilian form than she did her human form. And she's a really good-looking lady. So I found that quite fascinating. But this is what she said about her understanding of herself. There are various reasons for the hybrid program. They differ depending on species and if they're involved with the military. And that's another aspect I don't know if I'll get into. If I can, I'll try. Now, I've met many and talked to many of the younger new humans. This young lady is from Spain, extremely articulate. Marina, this is one of her images of herself. And she said at 13, she had a feeling of being a hybrid. I started to look at myself in the mirror and noticed that I had ET features that nobody in my family has. Slanted eyes, typical ET oval face, weak jaw, pointed chin, and so on. I asked myself, where did these genes come from? And I started to feel and sense some ETs abducted my mum when I was an egg and gave me alien genetics. My parents and I, we live in two different worlds. I started to see the word hybrid most often everywhere. My DNA started activating when I was 15 intensely and very fast, so I experienced a very accelerated awakening. It was so prompt, my energy shift, part of my body was cold, and I had the ability to go out of my body consciously to another dimension in my astral body when I wished, without the need of meditation or laying down. I instantly remembered what some would call my star origins of Andromeda and Arcturus. Now, this is a 16-year-old. Remember, these are young people. Wake-up call encoded, born in 2000. She's saying here, this was the wake-up call she had at 13. Starseeds came here with this wake-up call, encoded in their DNA so they can wake up, determines the point in their lifetime, so they can align to their mission, in my case at 15 years old, so they become aware of the program, as she has done. One of the things that she also became aware of was being monitored, because they recognize energy signatures of the new ones. And that is important to note. I even recall a lot of intuition and read people's thoughts, not verbally, the words, but the information more vibrationally. At 6 years old, I remember that I was being visited by black helicopters. I was in my pool and a huge black helicopter, a military one, passed just above me close several times. I was convinced they were observing me. And at 13, I started to be manipulated by the government. They have the ability to know where the star children are incarnated and their abilities. They pick up the energy signature.
سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه.
The Latin translation for morning star is Lucifer. The phoenix bird and double-headed eagle are important symbols in Freemasonry.
I believe the big lie that's going to be hoisted upon the world is that the aliens created mankind, which I categorically reject. It's funny, the people that will accept the fact that the Anunnaki, star creatures, came to this planet will avoid fallen angels like a plague.
"150 years ago, the business corporation was a relatively insignificant institution. Today, it is all-pervasive. Like the church, the monarchy, and the Communist Party in other times and places, the corporation is today's dominant institution. This documentary examines the nature, evolution, impacts, and possible futures of the modern business corporation. Initially given a narrow legal mandate, what has allowed today's corporation to achieve such extraordinary power and influence over our lives? We begin our inquiry as scandals threaten to trigger a wide debate about the lack of public control over big corporations.
I do think there is an overhang over the market of distrust. Listen, 95% or some percent, huge percentage of the business community are honest and reveal all their assets and got compensation programs that are balanced, but there are some bad acts.
The media debate about the basic operating principles of the corporate world was quickly reduced to a game of follow the leader.
I still happen to think the United States is the greatest place in the world to invest. We have some shakeups that are going on because of a few bad apples.
Some people call me a bad apple. Well, I may be bruised, but I still taste sweet. Some people call me a bad apple, but I may be the the sweetest apple on the tree.
These are not just a bunch of bad apples.
This is just a few bad apples.
It's not just a few bad apples.
We've got to get rid of the bad apples. You can start with Tyco.
Bad apples.
We know all about WorldCom.
Bad apples.
Xerox Corporation.
Bad apples.
Arthur Anderson.
Bad apples.
Enron, obviously.
Bad apples.
Kmart Corporation.
The fruit cart is getting a little more full.
I don't think it's just a few apples, unfortunately. I think this is the worst crisis of confidence in business.
What's wrong with this picture? Can't we pick a better metaphor to describe the dominant institution of our time? Through the voices of CEOs, whistleblowers, brokers, gurus and spies, insiders and outsiders, we present the corporation as a paradox, an institution that creates great wealth but causes enormous and often hidden harms.
Which is what happened in 2000 when I got involved in reform inside the World Bank, where the people who own the World Bank, it's like a big cooperative. The U.S. owns 16%, and the rest of the countries, 188 of them, own different amounts. And you get to vote in accordance with how powerful you are. Okay, so I was part of the board's decision that they were going to allowed the World Bank to have more money, but only if they improved the human resources. And I was on that committee, and the agreement was that those managers that were doing a good job would get promoted, and those managers that were doing a bad job would either get training or they would get fired. And that reform got completely rolled back. We brought in somebody from IBM to do this, and he came to me, he said, Karen, I don't understand it. I say a manager's good and needs to be promoted, and that one gets fired. I say somebody is crooked, and that one gets promoted. What's going on here? He said, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to last. Alberto Bazan, he got fired.